Alright. NET-113. IT Essentials. 9/27/16. Day 9. Okay. Motherboards. The whole chapter's been on motherboards. Motherboard, we talked about the form factor. Processor sockets, we mentioned 2 of them. So this is all review. We did this the other day about insertion. So you've got the chip and we've got a way to insert it with some type of lever. So we get the same force all the way around when you put it in, or it's held down. Major manufacturers of motherboards: Intel, AMD. And then we got talking about resources in the computer and what uses the resources. The motherboard really connects all the resources. Who has access to the processor when? We talk about cache memory nowadays right in the processor. We talk more about processor next chapter, and memory. Actually, next chapter these 2. Resources to memory. We have RAM, we have ROM or flash depending on your system. We have ports, USB, all those different ports we've talked about. And we have expansion slots. And these things are all connected to the motherboard in order that we can communicate between those. Who gets to communicate with what and when. Talk about managing resources. Alright, next thing we talked about, we reviewed chipsets, mainly Intel, ADM. You can find lots of information online and the generations and how those have changed over time. Okay. And then we talked about priorities, and so then we need to understand the difference here between software and actually hardware. So we started talking this week about firmware, what happens when a system boots and then the operating system gets loaded. What things can the firmware do? Well, first of all, we used to have BIOS, basic input-output systems. You need some way to communicate with the system, so you need to be able to use the keyboard. So somewhere in that firmware it has to allow you to start using the keyboard. And then somewhere in the firmware it has to be able to get to the hard drive in order to load the OS. So a number of things have to happen before the operating system gets loaded. Once the operating system gets loaded, all those resources we talked about, most operating systems manage those. Bus and expansion slots. What does a bus do? It creates a path. It can send power, control signals, memory addresses, data. It can move that information through. What's it moving? Remember, it's binary. Base 2. Path size. They talk about 8 bits. We got 8 lines to send information back and forth. Or we can send 16, 32, 64-bit paths. Why those numbers? We reviewed a little bit because it's binary. Base 2. Right, 2 to the first, 2 to the second, 2 to the third, and so forth. System clock. Now we don't have any that are kilohertz, but we talked about the size of that, 2 to the 10 or 1024. Right, you run into some megahertz, most of them are gigahertz. Gigabillion, million. Things are measured inside the computer based on the clock. How many ticks per second? Hertz. And then down here, I mentioned a hard drive, 2 terabytes. Now that's not bits, it's bytes. 8 bits give us a byte, typically. So we talked about this, and then accessing that. Some older systems couldn't, some older BIOS couldn't access large hard drives, but new ones can. And the difference, we talked about the master boot record and the new ways in which we do that. So, just a little review over here. Yeah, the motherboard, and on there, processor, memory. You have a bus system that moves information through, and you can have slots and so forth. You can have ports connected, in which we can connect peripheral devices there. You can connect the hard drive. You have some type of power supply that gives power to the motherboard. Power supply. Alright? So we're trying to understand all those things here. Let me go on. We finished up the day doing two things. First of all, we talked about different types of slots. At least we mentioned PCI, PCIX, PCIe, and we talked about firmware. Not a lot, a little bit, and then the students worked on the labs. They could work in groups or individually. Okay. Finish that up. Next time we're going to finish up chapter 3 on motherboards. We got a number of in-class things we'll do. Alright. So that's it.